So we're currently in a bit of an off-season in terms of Miraculous. It's been about a year since we finished off Season 5, with the international release of The Final Day Part 2 coming out on the 1st of July. And whilst we did have some content in the meantime since, the film adaptation that sort of covers the Hawkmoth Gabe arc, with a lot of creative liberties taken by Zag, and then we have the Miraculous World special, and then the recycling episode they did that was meant to take place sometime during Season 5, that released in September. But yeah, the main arc of the story, the show, Gabe, Hawkmoth, Shadowmoth, Monarch, the big dog, the final boss, he was finished off almost a year ago, after a run of almost 8 years. 8 years in which, whilst the animation did improve, it was in small leaps, baby steps. I mean, when you're looking at the quality of Season 1 and then compare that to the World Specials or even Season 5, you can tell there's a massive difference in the quality, enough that you can still tell it's the same show with the same feel, but also clear that they had more cash to splash to make it look just a little bit better. But like I said, it was incremental, and it made a lot of sense. Nobody wants to see a show that looks like trash, so you gotta push things along. And like I said just before, it's been a fair while since we had any fresh content. We're just waiting for this new era of the show to start. A new era that promises a lot of things. New storylines, heroes, villains, locations, arcs. We have Adrianette sailing full steam ahead. Let's just hope the creative team can resist the time-honored tradition of annoying the fanbase by forcing a breakup arc, and having them come back together again in a much less satisfying way than they did the first time they did it. Dragon Prince, I'm looking at you, son. But in the meantime, they've done cons and panels and expos and whatnot. And all of this allows for leaks, and if you've spent any amount of time engaging with the fanbase over the last little while, or if your social algorithm is still keyed into Miraculous content, then I guarantee you've stumbled across leaks of stills and trailers, images, even just posts talking about it. And hell, even just social media posts from Zag himself, because the number one leaker of Miraculous content is in fact Zag. And what is in these stills and clips? Well, put it simply, they've improved the animation. They've changed the art style. And I'm not necessarily going to show this to you. The reason I'm telling you it's easy to find and you'll easily stumble across it on social media without having to dig or anything is because I don't want to have to post it. I'm not thinking it's a good idea for me, as I remember back in the day, people would get in trouble for posting leaks and whatnot. And since I care about my channel and all of that, I'm not going to risk it. Sorry. But I do want to talk about it, as it seemed to have caused quite a bit of stir in the online portions of the fanbase. And the jury has sort of been rather out on the whole thing as of right now. There's a lot of people that think it heralds a good change for the show, and then there's those that think it's a terrible idea and that the show should have remained as is. Now, I kind of get both sides of it. Like, when you look at the stills and the clips and whatnot that have been leaked, there's a significant difference in the show's overall design. Yes, it's still recognizably Miraculous, but by switching engines and, I presume, pumping up the budget rather significantly, the overall appearance is still vastly different. It's like when somebody you know loses or puts on a huge amount of weight, and you don't meet them in the midst of their journey. The change is therefore very jarring when you see them again, or it's like when you see a celebrity that's changed their hairstyle, hair colour, or gotten very, very obvious work done, plastic surgery or whatever. You can still tell it's the same person and everything, but there's something that feels wildly different, and your brain feels like it's struggling to catch up. Everything feels jarring. Honestly, so you see Adrian or Marinette or whatever, and they don't quite look right. And that's exactly how I felt when I first saw them. It was a bit of what? And I think a lot of this applies most heavily to Adrian, or at least the backlash does. You can even see this for the film release. I remember when the film first had trailers, I was fully on the bandwagon in terms of its design. A little bit jarring at first, but I got behind it very quickly. It looked great. Nice and beautiful. Truly a cut above the show in every single way. The water, the buildings, the sky, the character models. Oh, the character models especially. Everybody got a glow up for their big screen debut. But even then, despite the obvious jump in quality, I saw lots of dissent. And usually, this was not surrounding Chloe or Alia or Marinette. Not Gabe, not the environments, not the water, not the monsters. It was only about Adrian. People seem so wholly unsatisfied with the changes that were made to him. Hell, now you can even stumble across people's edits online, frequently, that make Adrian look more, I don't know, masculine maybe? Older, less kiddish? And there's no doubt that there's some of that same feeling here, that people are dissatisfied with the way that some of the new models look. Like, yeah, there's some people that are simply dissatisfied with it in general, saying it looks generic and the OG had its own vibe, its own flair that made it stand out, even if it was objectively lesser quality overall. So on the one hand, I did sort of understand, not really with the film honestly, like, imagine if they'd served up something that looked like the actual show in terms of quality, but made you pay for it in the cinema. Nah, that would have been terrible. But with the visual upgrade to the show, I do see how some people might be a bit put off. It is a big change from what we've seen, and some of the clips do look a little bit janky, a bit choppy. Despite obviously being higher quality images or whatnot, there's this vibe of it being lesser in terms of the actual animation, the movement, if that makes sense. It's less fluid. And compounding on that, there's also a lot of dislike about the specific appearance of Adrian. I'd say of all the visuals we've seen leaked, the one that's getting memed out and clowned on the most, by far has got to be Adrian. A lot of comparisons to Justin Bieber. I mean, classic old school Biebs, the Beatle cut. But yeah, whilst I think I can understand that people are slightly put off by the changes, I do think that ultimately, it's only a good thing for the show going forward. If you don't like what Adrian looks like and think he looks baby-faced or don't like his hair, fair enough, that's valid. That's just opinions, really. I get it. I think all of that just comes down to taste, but I do think most of the other issues are somewhat overblown. In terms of it looking janky or choppy or what have you, have you seen some of the earlier seasons? It ain't always looking good. There's a lot of wacky animation, a lot of weird expressions, and a general dip in quality. Sometimes you'll have episodes that are really well animated, look great, and then sometimes it's like Marinette becomes the Antichrist. It's just not good. The faces are weird, the expressions are weird, the movement's weird. And from what I've seen of this leaked stuff, that animation, I don't think it really dips below the worst quality the show had. And whilst you might be thinking, oh, that's not very flattering, you're comparing this new, expensive animation to the worst of the old series. But, I mean, not really, because this is the unfinished product anyway. It's not like it's going to release like this, not going to ship like this. It's obviously a work in progress used to drum up interest and show progress, to show off what they've done. It's not meant to be like, oh yeah, look at this, we've made the models higher quality, but we've crapped out on the animation, but it's all finished, we're just going to sit on it for months and release it later this year. No, that's not how it goes. By the time it's released, it's going to look smoother, less janky, it'll be more fluid, much higher quality, and not just compared to what we've seen in these leaks, but compared to the OG show as well. It's going to blow it out of the water, let's be honest. That's just the reality. You may not like the style, but it is going to look so much better. I guarantee you. On top of that, I think this change bodes well for the future of the show. In that, we're into a new arc, yes, but there was no real indication on how long things were going to last in terms of the show's run. A couple more seasons, sure, that's confirmed, but with this, it feels like they might be setting the show up for the long term, significantly long term. Better animation costs more money, that's just how things work. As the quality of work increases, the price of such work is going to increase along with it. So, what does this mean? Well, it means there's likely been a significant infusion into the budget of the show. Surely that can't be argued at this point. And if they're investing this sort of money into the show, then it must be very clear that the franchise is very, very, very lucrative. I mean, I think it was already pretty clear it was making bank, but to me this feels next level. Sometimes it does feel like the overall popularity of the show has dipped quite a bit, but that's really only looking at it from the perspective of people engaging with it online. But when you think about it properly, there's likely a massive silent majority that's growing every year as it continues to go into shit like Disney Plus and become more and more internationally accessible. And with this increased popularity comes the big bucks, which allows them to invest more in the show to keep the cash cow milking for as long as they can. And for what it's worth, this is all just my speculation, but to me such a drastic shift in the animation style and quality can only herald deeper pockets. They want it to keep going long term, keep growing in popularity and prestige, keep getting more and more lucrative with its target audience. And I honestly think that these graphical and animation improvements, they're just going to be canaries in the coal mine, really. As with deeper pockets and a larger budget, you can do more than just improve the visuals. You'd hope that with this cash infusion, other things are going to be improved upon and developed further, because if you're going to spend all that money to make your product look like $1 million, well, surely you'd want the overall quality to be much higher than it has been previously too, right? A new era for Miraculous to take it to even greater heights than it has been before. With better animation comes potential for more action, more intense fights, better combat sequences, more fluid, more fast pace. Already at times the action in the show can be really good. And I'm intrigued to see how it improves going forward. You can have more background characters and visual diversity, like in the film where the world just felt more alive. I realize ultimately it doesn't add all that much, but it looks more exciting, looks more interesting when the streets are filled up. And filled up with more than just the same handful of copy-paste background assets. And then, and this might be a stretch, surely you wouldn't chuck all this time and money at the show to make it look good and then have the actual story be trash, right? Regardless of whether you like the last 2 or so seasons, I think it was clear that they did make efforts to have longer term arcs and storylines. And most importantly, unique and different episodes that played with the formula that established, diverging from it, becoming a bit more interesting as a result. So yeah, ultimately, whilst I kind of get people being a bit shocked at the change, I also just think, well, it straight up looks better. And the idea that it's now somehow losing its identity and is becoming generic, nah. I've seen some comments and posts talking about how it's like Pixarifying itself, and I gotta say, Pixar stuff looks far better than Miraculous has ever looked, so I don't see why that would be a bad ideal to strive for. Just saying. I think this is going to help the show stand out in a big way, and is simply the right decision going forward. And on top of that, I think it bodes well in terms of time, focus, and money that's going to be invested in the franchise to make it as good as possibly can be. Whilst also perhaps getting us more content on top of that. You know, we'll see. But yeah, not really much else to say other than that, and so with all that being said, I just think it's a weird backlash. And it's one that's going to be forgotten about by the end of next season, and will be occasionally brought up on forums to laugh about. And so yeah, with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of this update to Miraculous's look? Are you on board? Maybe not. I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.